Hey everyone, welcome to the Naughty Shaman podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Carlisle, and I can't wait to dive in to a world where the sacred meets the wild and keeps things totally real. In each episode, we are going to dive into what it truly means to live a radiant life that is unapologetically real. And if you're ready to get started, so am I. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Naughty Shaman podcast. This is Natalie Carlisle, your host, and we are going to talk in this episode about something that's happening to so many clients that I've been talking to, and it is this overwhelming feeling of being overwhelmed by life. So many people that I talk to right now are feeling overwhelmed by the news and media and politics and what's happening with global weather and what's happening to their retirement accounts and their bank accounts and their mental health and their children's mental health. And so I thought I would make this podcast about how to get out of overwhelm, how to get out of that feeling. We've talked about it before on these podcasts, but tonight, the way that I want to take a look at the feeling of overwhelm and how to move through it and beyond it ultimately is through the spirit of Colibrí, which is the hummingbird. And the hummingbird is a mythic being, or not, he's not a mythic being. The hummingbird's actually real in physical reality. And especially since I just got back from Peru, where there are so many species of hummingbird. And I had a couple encounters while I was there. It just got me thinking about how we can use this amazing symbol of the hummingbird and use it to help ourselves move through overwhelm and get back on track, back to a feeling of levity where we have the confidence to get through all of the daily rigors of life. So that's what we're talking about tonight. I hope you're in the right place, and I want to just thank you for being here. So when we talk about overwhelm and we talk about that feeling, it's essentially the assessment that when we look into the future is going to require something of us that we either don't understand or we assess that we will not be able to handle. So when we're feeling overwhelmed, it's kind of a cousin to the emotion of anxiety. It starts to create this low grade or high grade anxiety in us. And we start to shut down. That's typical response when I hear people feeling overwhelmed. It's almost like a safety measure. It's like, the pressure inside gets up to that red line and all of a sudden the systems are like, abort mission. And so it goes, and overwhelm sets in. Overwhelm can lead to feelings of apathy, numbness. It can lead us down the path of our, big and small addictions, whether that's scrolling or eating or truly struggling with alcohol and other addictions that are out there. So this feeling of overwhelm, we try to numb it in many ways. And that's one of the clues that you can look to see, okay, am I just been kind of spacing out for 12 hours of repeated Hulu episodes, or what's going on? So if you've been numbing yourself, you've been feeling like you just can't get out of bed in the morning, you just want to shut down, then this might be what's happening to you, is just existential malaise that is happening to people all around the world right now. Because existing in the world that we have created is getting overwhelming. We are bombarded by information from so many directions. There's actually a phobia that's on the books now that's essentially about not knowing enough. So because we can't figure out all of the change and the unknown of our future, there is this sense of having to know more and never knowing enough that is starting to create a phobia and anxiety and other mental illnesses. And it's because we've become addicted to information. And many of us mistake information or knowledge for wisdom. I'm going to say it again for the people in the back. So many people are mistaking knowledge for wisdom. Because the situations that we are in our lives, in the world, that are causing this overwhelm, I propose that we are not going to be able to think our way through this. We're not. We fought our way into it. We used our mind into this. All the decisions we made from solely a mental perspective, a logical analysis version of decision making is what got us here. We've left behind as a culture two very important other energy centers that we need to start weaving into our decision making. It's the center of the heart, the emotional center, understanding our moods and emotions and how they influence our decision making, which we don't value as a culture. Many people value it personally, but many people do not value it in our culture. So it's sort of a cultural norm to leave your emotions at home and and that's changing in the workplace. And smart, conscious leaders are allowing the whole person to emerge in the workplace. But traditionally, this has been a huge challenge for us in our culture, especially in the West. The other energy center that we're leaving behind is the energy center deep down between the pelvic bones. This is the energy center of the body, the corporal body of taking action. And we as a culture, again, this is changing, thank goodness. But traditionally, we have learned to ignore the needs of our body. Especially I think for men, because they have historically, because this is all under reconstruction right now, which is so exciting for me. But historically, what we're reconstructing right now is this idea that men can't show emotion, that men have to be strong and they cannot show vulnerabilities, that they have to carry so much weight on their shoulders and carry it in a way that shows strength. It's very one-dimensional. So it hurt people that adopted that archetype as much as, the people that were watching that. So this is all under reconstruction, which is great because thinking our way out of overwhelm does not work. We have to use the other energy centers and we have to shift our state of consciousness. We have to shift our state of consciousness. And I don't mean go take a bunch of drugs. That doesn't really solve anything. When you wake back up after that, you still got the pile of shit you had when you took them in the first place. So doing ayahuasca, doing psilocybin, doing cannabis alone will not do the trick for you. It will not solve overwhelm. It will not solve the life problems that you're having. So let's take a look at how we can shift consciousness and what does that mean? Because essentially, when we talk about consciousness, what we fear right now is essentially the unknown, because everything is under reconstruction. Things are starting to fall apart and not work as well as they used to. Our systems of government, our systems of education, how we get food, how we get water, all these huge systems, these huge global systems. Some of them are not working as well or are not sustainable. And so when we look into the future, a typical person will feel an amount of dread or overwhelm because there's so much we don't know. We don't know what the future holds. And so we don't know how to prepare for it. I think about this because my son Keller is in college and my daughter Kaya is going into college next year. And so I think a lot about, it used to be you go to school, you learn a trade, you learn a skill, and then you go do that thing. And that's what college was for. And now, there are some reports that even in medicine, so much of that is going to start shifting to AI, in law, in teaching, in so many realms. Everything is kind of up for grabs. We're doing new things in these traditional jobs. And I think, well, how do I prepare my kids for the future when I don't know what the future is going to be like, right? Should I teach them how to hunt and gather berries to feed themselves, or should I teach them how to, be a lawyer? And it's so, because we just have no idea what the future holds. The beautiful thing is that we really never did. We really when you think about it, never did have an idea of what the future would hold. It's impossible. It's impossible. But that fear of the unknown is called a xenophobia. It's a fear of the unknown thing. It used to be like a fear of strangers or different races, different nationalities. But xenophobia is more actually a broader phobia or anxiety disorder that is about being afraid of what is not knowable. And so this is why we need to start shifting consciousness, is because we have to accept now, especially, that there are so many unknowable things. I know that's going to make some of you squirm in your chair. There are some things, many things, that are unknowable. It's the mystery of life that people have been trying to squeeze into science, into provable data, and some things are just unknowable. And this is where the shaman works. This is where the ontological coach works, is in this field of how do you navigate a world that is unknowable. And the hummingbird and the archetype of the hummingbird has some clues for us in that. But before we get to the hummingbird, I want to talk a little bit more about this consciousness, because we develop our consciousness. So many people are on this spiritual journey to escape pain. It's not a great reason to go on a spiritual journey, because that is not what you will find on a spiritual journey. The spiritual journey, if you're going about it with reverence and care and openness, can be painful in itself. And it can, with a good teacher, will help you reconcile pains that still live in the body or in the mind or in the heart. And what you'll find through a spiritual journey is how to reconcile and revere the pains of life that occur, and revere the joys of life that occur. And so, trying to avoid pain, we know, is not a great recipe for living a super vital life of well-being. But when we're trying to raise our consciousness, here's a better reason to do it than to avoid pain. The reason that we grow in consciousness and expand our minds is so that we can open up to a wider range of possibility. That's the reason that we want to do self-inquiry or sacred inquiry with others, is that we want to get deeper inside of ourselves so that we can understand the landscape that we're working with on a daily basis. And through this deep understanding of the three energy centers, the mind, the heart, and the body, then possibilities can expand. And that doesn't come from reading a book, right? To grow your consciousness in a way that involves the whole self, all three energy centers, the whole self and spirit and the energetic, I find that it's best to work in community. The lone wolf, like I'm going to go study and do ayahuasca by myself and breathe, Wim Hof, whatever, by myself, those days that can still happen. But what we really are challenged to learn, I feel right now, is how to be in community with one another, and how to come together in a community that is supportive of growth in consciousness. We do the growth in consciousness so that we can understand how to deal with the difficulties in life and make wise choices for how to respond. That's it. We want to grow in our consciousness. We want to grow our spiritual understanding so that we can do our daily lives better. This is what some teachers in Peru will call growing corn. They'll say, we do all this shamanic journey and journeying into different dimensions and all this cool shit is great, but it doesn't mean anything if it doesn't make your life better, if it doesn't make your community better, if it doesn't help you put food on the table, if it doesn't help you live with more love, more vitality, more longevity, then all of this spiritual work is for nothing. And so I love that description of consciousness, is that the reason that we develop it is so that we can, do our daily lives better and respond better when we don't have a way of knowing, so that we can respond better to the unknowable things. And I think that when I think about my kids, I think that's one of the skills that I want to make sure they understand, is this adaptability, this learning agility, this agile thinking and ways of being and ways of changing perspective. I think that those skills are hard to come by, because not many people are teaching it. But it's also, I think, the skill that no matter what gets thrown in your way in terms of daily life, you're going to have the adaptability and wisdom to respond in a way that's going to grow corn, that's going to make you better, stronger. It's going to make your community better and stronger. And so for me, there's no better time than right now to study the wisdom teachings. For me, I see it as so critical, because the schools aren't teaching these skills. Many parents don't understand these skills. And there are very few spiritual teachers that teach the human skills of learning agility, adaptability, and resilience. And we have to combine these. We can't just have our spiritual life and our physical life, our human life. The time of, what's the word I'm looking for? This time of dichotomy is over. Like, we're coming into a time of union where we need to combine yoga. We need to bring these two things together. We're even seeing the disintegration of the ideas of masculine and feminine. It was once one of the staples of understanding the spiritual path, was understanding these masculine and feminine energies. And I've taught it. I still teach it. But what's happening now with this is there's a blending now of this place of oneness. And this is where my curiosity is, because we are coming out of the time of duality. We're coming into a time of union. And this is another reason why we have to grow our consciousness with wise teachers, wise friends. And it can't just be drug induced. You do not need to do that in order to grow your consciousness and start living in the spirit of the hummingbird. So the last couple of things that I want to say about consciousness before we dive into how Colibrí can help us with raising our consciousness, getting out of overwhelm, is that we have a couple of kinds of power that we need to come into right relationship with. In Quechuan, that's the language of the old Incan language. There are the Caro Indians that still live in the mountains in the Andes, and the old language that they speak there is called Quechua. So in Quechua, there's a term that my teacher Alberto taught us, and it's this term called Aini. And we all giggled like 12-year-olds, because we're like, it sounds like Heine, but it's a powerful word, and it's spelled Ayni, Aini. And essentially that word in Quechua means not quite union. It's a little bigger than that. It means coming into balance, into all things in right relationship. So, the journey of raising our consciousness, our spiritual journey, becomes about coming into right relationship with who we are, our ways of being in the world. And we come into right relationship with others. We come into right relationship with pain, with money, with our families, with anger. So whenever everything is experiencing an imbalance, then the journey becomes bringing things back into a state of homeostasis, of Aini, of right relationship. Not right like right and wrong, but right as in aligned with your soul, aligned with your being, right relationship. That's what Aini means. And so when we talk about power, many people have a visceral reaction to either I don't want any power, or I hate power, or those people with power are assholes, or they're afraid of having power because of what they've seen. Now is the time for us to come into right relationship, or Aini, with our personal power. I'm going to say this because the time of not embracing our power is gone. It's gone. You cannot affect change in your life, in your health, in your relationships, in your finances, if you are not in right relationship with your own power. It's impossible. You need a level of personal power in order to heal, in order to forgive, in order to create. And so coming into right relationship with power, not overusing it or underusing it, but being an I me with power is so important. And I want to start thinking of power, not power over, but power within. You know, some people always assume power over others, but personal power, which is essentially about our capacity to take effective action in the moment. It's a great description for power, right? How can we take effective action in the moment? We have to develop this capacity, and we cannot do it from the mind alone. We have to understand and master our mind and our emotions and moods and our physical body. Like all three of these things need to come together as a whole, because again, the time of living all separated and fragmented is coming to a close. It's not sustainable for any human to live like that. So how do we bring these things together? There's another kind of power that I want to talk about too, and it's transformative power. Now, transformative power is a power about the capacity to transform your states of consciousness. So first we come into right relationship with our personal power. And then we can begin to own and come into right relationship with this idea that we can transform our capacity to see the world differently. And we can expand our consciousness under our own steam without, taking a bunch of drugs. I used to love drugs. I'm not hating on drugs or ayahuasca churches or anything. Those things have a beautiful place in the world. I'm suggesting that if you rely solely on those things and are chasing mystical experiences only, then for me, you're missing the whole point. That's not what the journey is about. So transformative power is about how we adjust and transform our consciousness and how we grow it. And now I'm going to talk about the hummingbird because, the last thing about transformative power, why that is so important to me is because when we can understand as human beings our power to transform consciousness, then we have a wide array of possibilities for how to respond to those unknowable things that cause overwhelm. So that's the connection. We get overwhelmed because we try to solve or see the world, see our lives through the same lenses with which are causing the overwhelm. It's like that Einstein quote, right? To just bang your head against that same wall and expect a different result. I paraphrase that, of course, but we have to shift levels of consciousness in order to solve what's happening in our lives. If there are some things that are out of balance, out of I me. And so owning our power to do that is what really is going to help us get out of overwhelm. And there's not an archetype around that does this better than the hummingbird, or colibrí, as they call it in Spanish, or quinti in Quechua. So we're going to talk about little quinti, little colibrí. And this archetype can help us understand different levels of consciousness. And for shamans and wisdom keepers and even ontological coaches, they wouldn't call it necessarily this, but it's all similar. Living in a consciousness state that's representative of the hummingbird is actually a way of living in the world where there is joy, there is the mythic. And so I'm going to start describing just a little bit about the animal, the hummingbird. And hopefully through these descriptions, you can start to understand why the hummingbird has become such an important archetype in so many different wisdom teachings, but especially the wisdom teachings from the Andes Mountains, because they have hundreds of species of hummingbirds there and they'll migrate through there and it's gorgeous. So let's talk about our friend Colibrí. I used to have a hummingbird feeder. I don't have one here because the deer eat it in Delaware. But anyway, I had these bird feeders all over the front yard of my house in Connecticut. And I remember one time I was feeding, putting up the bird feeder stuff. I could hear this buzzing, and I just thought it was a carpenter bee or something like that, because I didn't know what it was. And I'm swatting at it. This thing's flying around, and I'm trying to pour bird seed into the bird feeders, and it's all uncomfortable. And then this thing's buzzing around my head. I'm getting annoyed, and I'm like, rah. And all of a sudden, this little thing goes, zook, and it lands right on top of the bird feeder next to the one I'm filling. And we were like eyeball to eyeball, this tiny little ruby-throated hummingbird and I. And I was like, what is happening right now? It was almost like he was trying to talk with me. And he sat there for what seemed like, 10 minutes. It was probably 30 seconds, but it felt like a long time. It was like one of those moments in life where an event occurs and then time and space kind of fall away. It was like the experience of like being in love. And I was just looking at this hummingbird, and there was something about his intensity, and he flashed his little red throat, and then his red throat was gone. And that was the first time that I realized that hummingbirds can flash their brilliant colors, and they can also hide them. And that blew me away, because I just took that to mean, oh my gosh, how valuable it is to be able to go invisible, and how valuable it is to be bright and expressive, and what a range of skill it takes to do both of those. So I fell in love with hummingbirds even more in that moment. And I just got back from Peru. And it's summer down there, winter here. And so of course, there are hummingbirds flying everywhere. I joke that some of them are as big as chickens, because there is like this giant hummingbird in the Andes that is pretty big. I mean, it's not like a chicken big, but it's like a starling, like almost that size. It's really impressive with this long beak. Anyway, they're beautiful. So many different species down there. And so I was watching this hummingbird just kind of fly around down there. It was gorgeous. It was like a sparkling violeter. I forget, violeter, violet-y. I don't know how to say the last part. But this blue hummingbird. And it was just flying, and they fly in all directions. They can fly forward, backward, sideward. Their wings actually go around in circles. They're the only bird that can fly backwards. They're like a Black Hawk helicopter, these little guys. And so he's going, and all these flowers are in bloom. And he'll like kind of linger around one blossom and then not dive in, and then go linger on another blossom, not dive in, linger on another one, not dive in. They will search for the exact right blossom that is going to nourish them the most. It's mind-blowing. Like, these birds don't waste any time on shitty flowers. And for me, when I learned about the hummingbird of the Colibrí, this is one of the qualities that I value the most, because I can look through my life and think, what would a hummingbird do? Would a hummingbird waste time on this project? How much time and energy would a hummingbird give to this situation, to this person? Is this a place where my soul is nurtured, where there's nectar? Or is this a nectarless environment now? So this idea of passing by flowers that no longer serve you on a deep level, that no longer have nectar for your soul, is such a powerful way to begin reclaiming our personal power and reclaiming our energy, so that we can use our own energy to shift consciousness states. Because we tend as humans, and I'll speak for myself, I learned to give my energy away, to almost have leaks in my energy, so that other people could borrow it and other people would feel happy around me and be at ease around me. And so much of my own personal energy was just getting farmed out to the people around me who needed it. And so that I could make their lives easier, even if mine became more complicated. And I think that is prevalent in our culture. Many of us learned that and now are learning a new way of being in the world. So reclaiming our energy is one of the first steps to getting out of overwhelm. If you are feeling overwhelmed, then you need to start looking at all the blossoms in your life, all the projects and people and the dramas, all the things that are going on in your life that are stealing your mental, emotional, and physical energy. And you have to pass them by. You have to recover your ability to say, no, thank you. No. No is one of our birthrights. Unfortunately, for people who experienced trauma, perhaps in a young age, their no was taken from them. They learned that they did not have the ability to say no because the child would say no to the parents, and then the parents would override and harm them. So if this learning is a part of your history, then before you can do this, say no to the nectar, you need to recover your no. You need to learn that no, when we say no, it doesn't have to come with anger. It doesn't have to come with vengeance. It doesn't have to come with resentment. A no is simply is this right for me right now? Nope. Nope, can't serve on that committee. Nope, can't take your kids to school tomorrow. Nope, can't bake cupcakes for the whatever. Nope, can't take care of your dogs. I'm sorry. There's the no available to all of us. And when we reclaim that no, we're reclaiming our power and we're reclaiming a sense of dignity. So that's the first step in starting to get out of overwhelm, is reclaim your no and start using it to pass by flowers that no longer nourish your soul. That's easier said than done, I know. And that's why coaching is such a powerful thing, to have somebody to talk all this through and help you sort out your feelings and thoughts so that you can find a clear path forward that's filled with wisdom. So if you need that, we're here. So hummingbirds, here are a couple other fun facts about hummingbirds. Did you know, for instance, that hummingbirds are the smallest bird in the world and that they visit more than 1,000 flowers a day? What's amazing about this to me is that hummingbirds are also smart, and they remember every flower that they've ever drunk from. And not only that, so think about that. That's 1,000 flowers a day. They can live up to 12 years. They live between 3 and 12 years, depending on environment and if someone grabs them. But that's 1,000 flowers a day for potentially 10 years. That's like a crazy amount, right? You can do the math on that. But I love that idea of that they can remember the things that nourish their soul, and they trust that they'll find them again. They also remember how long it takes for a flower to replenish its nectar. That's amazing, like truly amazing. The other thing I find interesting about hummingbirds is that they spend most of their time perching, by the way, not flying around in all those cool ways, but they spend most of their time perched in a state of almost powered down, like hibernation. So they'll sit and perch and then they power down, and they'll power down for 10 minutes at a time or, an hour at a time, but they have to eat every hour. So they'll just power down, which makes their heart rate come down, everything. They're not using their energy. And because they just perch and they fly, what happened is over time in evolution, their little tiny feet have gotten so small that they can't walk. They don't walk. They can kind of do a shimmy to the side on a bird feeder, but they can't walk on the ground because their feet are too small. Evolution has made them even lighter so that they can fly with more precision. So cool facts, right? So this is where, for me, the hummingbird gets really helpful in getting us out of overwhelm and raising our consciousness, is that symbol of a bird being able to fly forward, backward, sideways, having the circular motion in their wings, this ability to just go in any direction at any time based on what's needed, is a huge metaphor for us to learn how to be more mentally agile and less stuck in our own belief systems. Once we get stuck in a belief system, we become like our feet are in cement. We are not agile. We are committed to a path and nothing's going to deviate and no. And the one thing that we know in life that's constant is change. So carrying our belief systems with a little more levity can be really powerful. It's actually the second step to really raising our consciousness, is we have to break up with this idea of right versus wrong. And in some ways, we have to break up with this idea that there is a universal truth. Everyone's panicking now. It can feel like an anchor has come up and you're floating in the air without any direction when you start to adapt to this way of thinking. But for shamans, and a couple of different teachers have taught me this, is that, there's not really a goal, but one of the practices that they practice is this idea of non-attachment, of course, and of non-judgment. Those are kind of the foundational learnings. But as you get deeper into the teachings, there's this practice of non-believing. The interesting thing, like, imagine that. Something happened to me when I started to practice this. When you start to practice non-believing, just being open to whatever experience is available for you today, and not having to know why things are the way they are, not having to know what things are, not having to know so much, but just kind of drop into a very pure state of presence, being open and available to what's happening today. It's fascinating. The depth of awareness that starts to blossom in your mind, the things that you're able to see physically, energetically, spiritually, start to open up so much. Because when we take away beliefs and judgment and attachment, what we're left with is this purity of spirit that creates a tremendously safe space for life to reveal itself. It is a game changer. So I'm not saying abort science, because I love science. It's one of my favorite things. And with quantum physics, what we're finding is, even in the realm of science, this very fact-based, historical thing that we lean on, even in science and quantum physics especially, we can, learn that even, waves can be viewed as, or that particles, actually, these little tiny things inside of our nuclei, little quarks can be viewed, and particles can be viewed as either a wave or as matter, depending on the observer. So even there's this possibility of two things being one in the same moment. It's the double slit exercise. You can Google that and get all the details about it. But they shot these particles through like a slit, and they thought that one was going to be a wave and one was going to be particles. And what ended up happening is that they would change, whether they would be viewed as waves or viewed as particles, depending on the observer. And it's an amazing study about, does our consciousness influence the world around us? That's, I think, one of the questions that study opens up that is also unanswerable at this moment. It's one of those unknowable things. It's a place of mystery, but I love those places of mystery because they're on the edge. They're on the edge of what's becoming. And so when we can suspend our very rigid thinking about there's only one right way to put the milk back in the fridge, or to load the dishwasher, or to pray, or to, there's only one right way to do blah, blah, blah. When we can open that up to the possibility that there's no right way, there's the way you do it, and that's it, that we can then start to shift into higher levels of consciousness. So that's a big one for number 2, is step out of the realm of right and wrong and into this place of non-believing, of just pure experiencing. cool. So that's the other thing that hummingbirds can teach us. I love that. The next things that I want to talk about these hummingbirds is their bravery. Their bravery, and I don't even think they're conscious of this bravery. I don't know. I've not talked with a hummingbird recently, but hummingbirds will travel over 2,000 miles each way to migrate. So to migrate south from Alaska to Mexico is, over 2,000 miles. To migrate from North America to down south to Chile or to Ecuador or to Peru is 2,000 miles. These birds, think about this. There's a bird in Alaska, a little hummingbird. He's chilling, it's summer, he's drinking nectar, life is good, and all of a sudden, something inside of him goes, whoop, time to go. And they go. They go. They don't go back to their house and order a bunch of shit on Amazon that they might need for the trip, or call 10 friends and say, oh man, I don't know. I think I should go, but I don't know. What do you think? Is there going to be enough food? Are we going to have enough of this? Are we going to get lost? Should I get a map? They don't do any of that. Their instincts are so deep that they can trust them and they follow them. Now, friends, we are members of nature as well. So it would make sense, at least to me, that we also have instincts. These old, bone deep in the body. This is where the wisdom of the body for me is so important, is that we have in our bones instincts that we can tap into and listen to that can guide us. So we have this internal navigation system, like an internal compass of true north and what our soul needs right now and what it doesn't. And the third step that can take us out of overwhelm and really start to move our consciousness forward is this idea that we have an internal compass of instinct and we can trust it. I'm going to say it again. You have an internal knowing, a bone deep knowing that some people call intuition, instinct, and you can trust it. This is also a game changer. Because so many people, based on their experiences of life, have learned to distrust their instincts. I remember one time I was so sure this person was my soulmate, forever person, my person, and that we were going to run off and live happily ever after. Like the connection was so, so deep. And this person, decided to not be with me. And I couldn't understand because I was still clinging to the beliefs that there was only one person and that this person was it. So I was still clinging to those beliefs, causing all this suffering. But I learned in that moment, errantly, to not trust my instincts because I thought I was listening to my instincts. Like I just knew, I felt it. It was real until it wasn't. And so I cried and cried and cried and then called friends and did healing work and fire ceremonies and coaching and all the wonderful things. And what I began to see is my expansion of consciousness and my non-believing grew. So I was clinging to this idea about soulmates and if this isn't the one, then life is over and all that shit. So I broke up with those belief systems because they were causing me harm. And those belief systems, no one can prove whether they're true or real or not. They're just ideas, theories that are in the air. And so I can choose to pick them up or I can choose to set them down. And that's the way it is with beliefs. You can choose to pick them up. And if they work for you, continue. And if they don't, set them down. Other ones will fill in. And over time, we practice not picking up any. and just being in a state of wonder and awe. But anyway, I digress because I do love to talk about letting the place of non-believing. But this instinct, knowing and trusting our instincts is so critical. And what I learned through healing and in conversations with wise people is that I wasn't listening to my instincts in those moments. I was listening to my fear of loneliness. It's a big hot button for me because of my history. And so what the connection was that I was feeling, he wasn't feeling it, but what I was feeling was this fear of never having a love like this again. And it caused this strong attachment, and it caused this strong belief system that there was only one and he was it. And so it wasn't necessarily instinct as much as it was a wound that was guiding me. And so as you come into right relationship with your instincts, I'm telling you this story because I want you to understand that you can trust your instincts. And I would recommend doing some healing and coaching work around some of your old wounds of abandonment and attachment, because those old wounds that we have can kind of muck up what we think is instinct and what we think is fear. And with practices of coming into right relationship with your body, because, the somatic elements of your instincts tell us a lot. Tell us a lot about what's a fear and what's an instinct. And if you're not in touch with your physical body and your emotions, then it gets harder. So you have to start learning the language of your emotions and moods, and you have to start learning the language of your body and really being present to your physical self, because there is wisdom in these bones. That is where the instinct lives. Our wild nature are in these energy centers that we ignore. The energy center of the heart and the energy center of the body. That's where we remember our wild, and our instincts are still intact. And so then, like the hummingbird, when it's time for us to make a change in life, we just pick up and go and trust. We'll find the next flower that has nectar. We'll find the next way to get to Mexico. If we get lost, we'll find someone to ask directions. You go in trust in your instincts. And that brings us back to this idea of personal power and how important it is. So the journey through these three things that the hummingbird can teach us to get out of overwhelm, this idea that we have to break up with our beliefs, this idea is that we can trust our instincts, and the idea that, we really have to expand our consciousness from beyond what we think we know. These are the ways that we can start to break up with overwhelm. And maybe I should say this, the first thing we have to do is want to get out of overwhelm. For many of us, overwhelm is a mechanism that we can use to avoid responsibility. That's going to sting. Going to overwhelm, if that's a constant habit, throwing your hands in the air and going into overwhelm, it takes us into the place of feeling like a victim of life, that life is too hard, so life is the bully, and that we are the victim, we can't handle it, we're powerless. So staying, if going into a state of overwhelm with life is a habit that you have, then it is something that you learned to keep you safe. It is something that you learned to avoid responsibility, to avoid adulting, to avoid solving your problems, to avoid taking action, to avoid something. And so if overwhelm is a chronic experience that you have, there's healing work that needs to be done there on a deep level, because that learning happened for a reason. There's nothing wrong with you at all if you go to overwhelm all the time. It's just something that you learned how to do because taking responsibility was too scary, or making a choice and possibly having it be one that didn't help you was too scary. And so you learned to stay in overwhelm, and it became paralyzing. And there's a sense of safety there, because when you're overwhelmed and you're paralyzed, there's nothing you can do anyway. So it's a low vibration the state of overwhelm. There's not a lot of vitality in that mood. And it's easy, depending on what you consume and how you hold your belief systems, your personal power, and all these other things. It can lead you down a path where you will not thrive. You'll go right back into survival mode, which, thanks to our ancestors living as well as they did, many of us, especially if you're listening to this podcast, you're not in a state of fighting to survive physically. You are having a privilege of learning how to thrive mentally and emotionally. And this is a great privilege that we have right now. And thank you, ancestors. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Even the crazy ones, thank you for living well enough that we can learn from you and be here right now on the planet, elevating our consciousness. What a privilege. What a privilege. And for those of us who can, and those of us that do have the privilege to be doing this work right now, it behooves us to do it. To do it in the name of our own vitality, of our lineage to come, of our children's children's children. And for the ancestors, it behooves us to do this work on a deep level. So that's how Hummingbird can help you get out of consciousness. It's about reclaiming your power, reclaiming and coming into right relationship with your personal power and the transformative power that you have. Also, it's about coming into right relationship with this idea that you have instincts. You have instincts that are trustworthy, that you are trustworthy. And it comes with this idea that you can step into the place of non-belief. And the more you practice that, the more present, deeply present you will become. And sacred space will become you. It'll become your experience of life, so that everything you see becomes sacred. It's hard to explain. That's why it's one of the mystery teachings. It's not knowledge. You can't read about that in a book. It's a practice that you can practice, and then you'll have an experience, and then you'll know. There's no way of cheating. There's no way of just circumventing that. You can't dress like someone who knows this. You can't put on mala beads and a bunch of white and start saying the right words and truly understand what it's like to step into the place of non-believing, because there's a tremendous amount of freedom there. And it's one of those things that if you know, you know. And it's a beautiful, beautiful moment, beautiful kind of mountaintop experience. And then you forget and you get all the beliefs again, and then you start suffering, and then you're like, wait, I don't have to choose these beliefs. I can set them down, even if they came from my mother or my father or my spiritual leader that I trust and love. Your life can be made of your own creation. I can't tell you how powerful you are. Like, you are so powerful that you can create in your life right now a living hell. You can create that. Or you can create a heaven. Or you can create beauty. Or you can create whatever it is you're creating. It's an internal state that starts to reflect itself outward. And when you forget, then it's time to come into community, talk to wise friends, and remember who you are and how powerful you are. So this is what the Hummingbird has to teach us, is a tremendous bit of personal power and of instinct and of non-believing. So thank you so much for listening. I love making these podcasts. I love thinking about that. We're going to begin not too long from now a series called Doing Your Dharma, where I'm going to sit down with some amazing people who are doing work that's in total alignment with who they are and why they came to this planet. And they have so much to teach you, and I can't wait to get those podcasts out to you, because it's going to be just a riot. For one, it's going to be so filled with laughter and love and hilarity and inappropriateness, probably. And it's going to be filled with wisdom for your soul. So thanks for tuning in. This is Natalie Carlisle signing off from the Naughty Shaman podcast, where we like to keep the sacred a little bit wild and totally real. If you're hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, we are so grateful. Please reach out to us. Let us know what topics you'd like to see covered in our future episodes. Get in touch in the comments because we love to hear from you. And you can reach us on social media.